forgot to mention I also do the weather, and I can tell you that the cold front approaching from the west has come through. We'll be seeing temperatures drop in the next couple of hours in a massive winter storm tonight. I personally went with 5.5 to 11 inches. I think it will be towards the upper end of that range, if not massive ice. But that is not the reason I am here today. The reason that I am here, there we go. The reason I am here today is to talk about my political side, and I thought nothing would be more interesting than to know who would win next November, not this November, next November in the presidential election. And so the topic of my talk is why we already know who will win. That seems sort of crazy. We're a long way away. But the first question I want to ask is, why do presidents win elections? You know, oftentimes we think it's those great debate moments, Jack Kennedy. Sometimes we think it's going around kissing babies, all that sort of jazz that we all have to put up with. But what I'm here to tell you today is that, in fact, 80% of presidential elections, the results are already determined beforehand. Democrats going to pretty much get 40%, the Republicans going to get 40%. And so the question that we have to answer is, who's going to get that extra 20% of that pie? And I'm not really quite sure what type of pie it is, but it looked like 80%, so I chose it for this slide. And so what about that extra 20%? Is it going to be the babies? Is it going to be all that sort of jazz? And what I'm here to say today is, in fact, not really. It's not that. There are other variables we can use which can help us find that extra 20%. When I was doing research for my thesis, which I dropped because I actually was trying to find a girlfriend during the last 6 months of my time here, I discovered a relatively interesting economic model. Two talkers in a row about the economy. I hope 2 in a row doesn't put you to sleep. I know sometimes when I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, I manage to find myself falling asleep. In any event, he put together an economic model. His name was Douglas Hibbs, and basically he took the economy and deaths, and he plugged it in and found that when you use the economic measure, disposable personal income per capita, and deaths, military fatalities of wars that presidents started, you could determine about 87% the differences, 87% of the differences between elections. You can determine their results just by looking at those 2 variables. But I'm the type of person who doesn't necessarily invent things, but likes to make things better. I think there's a commercial like that out there. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little old for you people. In any event, so what I did was I'm a political guy. I thought, well, what other factors may play into this? And it turns out that I found 2 that did, Congress and term. And what the heck do those 2 variables mean? Well, Congress means basically who's in control of Congress right before the election. Right now, it's half controlled by the Democrats, half controlled by the Republicans. That's basically neutral. Term, how many terms has the current party who's controlling the presidency been in office? So Barack Obama's number 1, Democrats number 1, this is the first term. That's actually a really, really good thing for the Democrats. So I plugged that all in, quarter-on-quarter growth for disposable income, military fatalities, nothing for Obama, he hasn't started any wars. Congress, that's half. Term, first, so that's a good thing. And what did I find? Well, I came up with this nice little chart up here, and what you see is, well, look at that. Looks pretty good to me. The points pretty much fall right on the line. There are obviously some here and there. Usually the x-axis and y-axis be flipped, but I kind of like this look better. So I did it because I'm in charge of this. So you see, everything seems to fit pretty gosh darn well together. But there seems to be one huge error up there. It's 2000. I marked it off. This is something really strange that's happened. A lot of these models that go on historical trends actually have this problem right around 2000. Congressional models also have this problem where in 98 they were way off, and in 2000 this presidential model were way off. Well, some people, were trying to figure out, was it people not interpreting the economy correctly, what was going on? I personally think it's much simpler. I think it's this. I think it's Monica and Bill, and it sort of just threw everything off, and Gore didn't know what he was doing, although sometimes I do wonder if he still doesn't know what he's doing. So I decided, well, what if I took that variable out? And in fact, you can see now everything fits just about perfectly. And in fact, 97% of the differences between election results can be determined by those 4 variables I mentioned. Number 1, disposable income quarter over quarter during the term, with the end of the term being worth about 3 times as much as the beginning of the term, which makes sense. Number 2, military fatalities. So obviously, as I mentioned before, none for now. Number 3, Congress. So if you have full congressional control, you actually get a penalty, because I think people like split government. I know at least I do. And 4 was, did I mention? Yeah, term. 4 is term, and that's basically if you've been in, your party's been in office for more than 1 term, people don't tend to like that. They like to switch things up. But of course, this all tells us some, really interesting things. It says, okay, we can, do past results pretty well, but can we actually use it to predict future results at all? So I went back and I imagined myself that I took a time machine in my statistical programming, and I said, well, what if we eliminated 2008 from the fold? Does the model work pretty well? And in fact, if I had the data I have now, minus 2008, and I knew the state of the economy and everything else, I could tell you that, in fact, the model did ridiculously well, as sort of indicated by this nice little line all the way right here, how it nearly perfectly falls on it. I would have said that Barack Obama would have gotten about 53% of the 2-party vote, and he got about, in fact, 52.5, 52.7. So it would have worked very, very, very well. Of course, the incumbent party is what's measured on that. That's why it's so low. But I've talked about current presidents. But the real reason you're here today is to answer that question. Can we predict who's going to win the next presidential election? Well, we already know that Barack Obama is in his first term. That's a good thing. We already know that Congress is half controlled by the Democrats, half by the Republicans. And we already know there are going to be no military fatalities under a war started under Barack Obama unless something happens. But I don't think it will unless someone in here knows something I don't. So then the only question is, what about the economy? We know that during the first 2 years, the economy has been getting a little better, but But what about forecasting it? Well, I am not an economist. I couldn't possibly do that. I find myself throwing away money all the time. But luckily, the good people at Wells Fargo are predicting the economy 2 years in the future. They do predict disposable income. And so we can use that, plus the data we already have, and we can come up with an estimate. And what is the estimate? Well, the estimate is that President Obama will, in fact, be reelected with 51.4% of the vote. Obviously, there is some error associated with this. Economic forecasts aren't great. There's a margin of error within the model, if we use without 2000, of about plus or minus 1.5, 2%, depending. So there are some differences, but overall, if someone was to ask you who would win, you'd have a pretty decent idea, and you could say, well, if nothing else, I think President Obama probably will be reelected. That's all I got.